Have you ever looked around and realized that someone who once admired you, supported you, or even loved you suddenly turned cold, distant, or worse, hostile? The question is haunting. Why do people suddenly develop hatred for us? It feels like a storm with no warning. One day, everything is calm, and the next, you're navigating the sharp winds of resentment that seem to come out of nowhere. But the truth is, nothing ever appears suddenly. Hatred is not lightning. It is smoke from a fire that has been burning quietly, often in the hidden corners of the human soul. To understand the hatred that arises in others, we must descend into the depth of the human psyche where envy, insecurity, shame, and projection lie. Let's walk together through 5 key insights that may explain why people shift from love to hatred, and how we can respond with awareness instead of fear. When you grow, truly grow, from within, from effort, from struggle, from alignment with something deeper, you don't just change your life. You disturb the emotional comfort of those around you. Growth isn't a quiet thing, even when done humbly. It sends tremors into the foundations of others' self-perceptions. It becomes a mirror, and not everyone wants to see themselves reflected in it. Hatred often has little to do with who you are and everything to do with what you represent. You may walk into a room with love in your heart, sincerity in your eyes, and still be met with coldness. Not because you've done harm, but because your transformation reminds others of their own stagnation. Your ambition becomes a spotlight on their hesitation. Your confidence whispers of the things they could have done but never dared. This phenomenon is subtle but deep. A person sees you becoming something more courageous, more expressive, more fulfilled, and without meaning to, they feel exposed. Their inner critic stirs. Their own silent regrets rise like smoke. And in that discomfort, it becomes easier to project the pain outward than to look inward. They say, "You've changed." But often, what they mean is, "You're no longer making me feel comfortable about staying the same." Sarah's story is not rare. She grew up in a town where dreams were spoken softly and quickly forgotten. But she didn't let that script dictate her future. She studied late into the night, took risks, built something from nothing. At first, the community applauded her. They cheered her grand opening, posted pictures, called her brave. But as her business flourished and her name became known beyond the town's borders, the tone shifted. The compliments turned into comparisons, admiration turned into resentment. Why her and not them? And suddenly the support disappeared. Friends became critics, smiles became silence. They didn't hate her. They hated the feeling that came up inside themselves when they saw her succeed. They hated the mirror she unknowingly held up every time she lived her truth. This is the quiet burden of growth. You will lose people, not because you've wronged them, but because your evolution disturbs their stillness. When you climb higher, some will cheer, but others will feel left behind. And not everyone knows how to process that pain in a healthy way. Hatred becomes a coping mechanism. Distance becomes protection from the shame of perceived inadequacy. But you are not responsible for their reaction. You are not responsible for shrinking just to make others feel tall. The world needs examples of what's possible. The world needs people who risk judgment to become themselves fully. If everyone stayed small to protect others' egos, humanity would never evolve. So don't let their insecurities confuse your path. Their silence is not a signal to stop. Their rejection is not proof that you're wrong. Often, it is a sign that you're doing something rare, breaking cycles, defying expectations, changing narratives. And not everyone is ready to witness that. Let your life be a lighthouse. It may irritate the eyes of those still lost in the fog, but to someone, somewhere, it's the only light they see. In this life, you can stay still and be accepted, or you can grow and be misunderstood. Choose growth, always. There are parts of ourselves we refuse to face. Wounds we've buried, emotions we've silenced, impulses we pretend we never had. This hidden realm within each of us forms what many call the shadow, the rejected self that we suppress to maintain an image of who we think we ought to be. And when someone refuses to meet their shadow, to reconcile with it, they will inevitably cast it outward. They will look for someone to carry the burden of their unacknowledged pain. Often that someone is you. You may walk through life with integrity, with kindness, with truth in your voice, and yet find yourself misjudged. Someone calls you selfish, not because you are, but because they're wrestling with their own inability to give without resentment. Someone calls you arrogant, not because you speak too loudly, but because your confidence unsettles their own self-doubt. In these moments, it is not you they are truly seeing. It is themselves disguised as you. People project what they cannot accept. A man who has lied to himself for years will accuse others of deception. A woman drowning in guilt may label a joyful person as insensitive or naive. A friend who envies your peace may call it detachment, coldness, or indifference. But underneath these accusations lies a truth. They are not responding to your reality, but to the disowned parts of their own. Imagine being a mirror, not one that flatters, but one that reflects what is actually there. For some, that kind of reflection is unbearable. To see themselves truly might mean confronting years of denial. So instead, they distort the image. They tell themselves, "You're the problem." That way, the discomfort stays at a distance. That way, the real confrontation remains avoided. It can feel deeply personal when this happens, when you're misunderstood, vilified, or judged unfairly. But it is rarely about you. It is about their inner conflict searching for a place to be released. Their mind, unable to bear the weight of its contradictions, uses you as a container for its storm, and you, unknowingly, become the vessel for their projections. Understanding this doesn't mean you have to tolerate disrespect, but it does free you from the illusion that you must fix their perception. You cannot change what someone has not chosen to see. You cannot carry the work they refuse to do. What you can do is stay anchored in who you are. You can continue to walk with integrity even when others throw shadows at your feet. You can resist the urge to explain yourself endlessly, knowing their misunderstanding isn't rooted in your words, but in their wounds. This awareness also invites compassion, not passive tolerance, but a deeper empathy for the invisible battles people are fighting. The one who judges you most harshly may be the one in most pain. The one who mocks you might be terrified of being seen. The one who gossips may be running from shame. And while this doesn't excuse their actions, it does explain their energy. When you recognize projection for what it is, you stop internalizing the poison. You stop shrinking in confusion, asking, "What did I do wrong?" And instead begin to see clearly, "This is not mine to carry." You let them have back what was never yours. You stay rooted in your truth. In a world where few are brave enough to face their own darkness, you must become the kind of person who can. Because the more you integrate your shadow, the less room there is for others to pin theirs on you. You no longer become a mirror for their pain, but a reminder that healing is possible, and that kind of presence is not always welcomed, but it is always necessary. Jealousy rarely enters a room with its true name. It doesn't knock on the door and introduce itself with honesty. Instead, it slips in silently, dressed in righteousness, cloaked in concern, painted in the language of morality. People don't say, "I envy your success," or "I wish I had what you have." No, that would require a vulnerability that threatens the very ego jealousy clings to, so instead they mask it. They disguise it as judgment, as critique, as subtle distance or sudden disapproval. They say, "You've changed," but what they often mean is, "You've grown in ways I didn't." This kind of emotional camouflage is common, especially among those we thought would celebrate us. It stings more because it often comes from familiar faces, friends, siblings, even mentors. You get a promotion, and suddenly your ambition is too much. You find peace in your relationship, and they start pointing out its flaws. You buy your first home, and someone reminds you of the struggles of others. At face value, these comments may seem harmless, even thoughtful. But beneath the surface, there's a discomfort that your joy has stirred in them. They are not reacting to your success. They are reacting to their perceived failure in comparison to it. Envy, when unacknowledged, seeks moral high ground. It can't simply say, "I feel less than." So it reframes the narrative, "You've become arrogant," or "You forgot where you came from." This moral tone gives them cover. It allows them to maintain a sense of superiority while never confronting the ache of their own longing. But here's the truth. People often judge what they secretly desire. They condemn in others what they feel disqualified from attaining themselves. It's a painful paradox. The more you rise in alignment with your inner self, the more you may disturb those who have settled. Not because you are attacking them, but because your light reveals their own dimming. Your joy becomes a painful contrast to their numbness. Your boldness highlights their hesitation. And in this mirror, instead of choosing self-reflection, they choose projection. They reach for judgment, not truth. They raise a moral banner to justify their discomfort. But morality used as a weapon is never about ethics. It's about insecurity in disguise. You must not shrink in the face of such disguised bitterness. You must not feel guilty for your growth, your peace, your victories. When the applause turns into silence or sarcasm, it's not a reflection of your character, but a window into theirs. Their coldness is not your burden. Their distance is not your responsibility to close. Still, this understanding should not harden your heart. Those who judge you harshly may be hurting deeply. Their silence might come from stories you've never heard, dreams they abandoned, chances they never took, love they lost or never found. And while it's not your job to heal their wounds, it is your choice to not let their pain make a home inside you. Recognize it for what it is, a cry from a place that feels forgotten, a soul watching the parade of life pass by and wondering when it will finally feel worthy of joining in. So when someone responds to your joy with judgment, hold firm, not in defiance, but in peace. Let their reaction pass through you without staying. Stay grounded in what you've earned and who you're becoming. Because the truth is, some people will only see your worth once they've done the inner work to see their own. Until then, they will wear their jealousy like armor, mistaking it for truth. But you must not wear their shadows. You are not made to carry someone else's silence. Keep shining, keep walking, keep becoming. There are times in life when you walk into a room and feel an invisible tension wrap around you. Cold stares, tight smiles, strange distance. And you wonder, what did I do wrong? You replay your words, examine your tone, question your presence. But often, the answer lies not in your behavior, but in the way your presence awakens something long buried in someone else. Human beings carry histories like invisible scars. Wounds from childhood, betrayals from the past, unresolved pain, repressed memories. They don't disappear simply because time has passed. They remain, quietly waiting beneath the surface. And then, one day, someone like you enters their life. You speak with conviction, you carry yourself with a certain energy, you look them in the eyes, you speak without apology, and suddenly, without meaning to, you become a trigger, not because of who you are, but because of who you remind them of. Your voice may echo the tone of a parent who criticized more than they ever praised. Your confidence may reflect a sibling who made them feel invisible. Your freedom may clash with their memories of being controlled. And even though you've never hurt them, your presence pulls at an old thread, and something inside them unravels. This is not about logic. It is about emotion. It is about the unconscious connections the mind makes when it feels threatened. The past and present blur. The wound speaks louder than reality, and you, without knowing, become cast in a role you never auditioned for, a villain in a story that isn't yours. Therapists witness this often. Clients confess deep discomfort, even dislike, for people who have done nothing to deserve it. One woman spoke of hating her boss, not because he was cruel, but because his way of giving feedback mirrored the cold, clipped tone of her father. Another man spoke of disliking his partner's friend, not because she had wronged him, but because her laughter, her posture, reminded him of a girl who humiliated him in school. The mind doesn't always separate present from past. It reacts, protects, defends. You might wonder, if I'm doing nothing wrong, why am I being treated this way? And the answer is, you're being experienced through the filter of someone else's unresolved pain. You are not being seen as you, but as a symbol, a stand-in for something they never healed. And while this truth can feel both unfair and heavy, it can also set you free. Because once you understand that the hatred isn't really yours, you stop trying to fix it. You stop walking on eggshells, bending yourself to win approval, shrinking to seem less threatening. You begin to realize that their reaction is not a reflection of your character, but a mirror of their past, and that realization allows you to stay rooted in compassion, not pity, not arrogance, but a quiet understanding. You don't have to carry their wound, you don't have to become small for their comfort, but you can, if you choose, remain kind. You can step away without bitterness. You can forgive what they projected, knowing it wasn't truly about you. Because in the end, every soul carries ghosts, and sometimes those ghosts rise not to haunt you, but to confront them. So if you're ever treated with hostility you don't understand, pause, look deeper, hold on to your peace. You may not be the cause of their pain, but you might be the mirror that reminds them it still lives. That's a powerful thing, and not everyone is ready to face it. But your role is not to heal them. Your role is to continue being whole. There comes a moment on the path of inner growth when you realize that not everyone who began the journey with you is meant to walk it to the end. This realization does not come easily. It is not accompanied by celebration, but by quiet sorrow. It is not about superiority, but necessity. Because the more you evolve, the more the space around you demands alignment, and not everyone is willing or able to meet you there. As you go deeper into your authentic self, you begin shedding what no longer serves you. You let go of roles that were once a survival strategy. You drop the masks you wore to be accepted. You stop clinging to relationships that were rooted in your old self. This shedding, this unlayering, is essential to growth, but it is also threatening to those who remain unchanged. They see you letting go, rising, questioning, expanding, and in your transformation they see a departure. You are no longer the version of yourself they were comfortable with, and instead of facing what that evokes in them, they turn it into resentment. They feel abandoned, not because you left them behind with cruelty, but because you no longer validate the roles they played in your old life. Maybe you were once the listener to their endless complaints, the quiet supporter of their chaos, the loyal presence who never questioned the dysfunction, but growth changes those dynamics. You start setting boundaries. You speak with clarity, you say no without guilt, and suddenly, what used to feel like closeness to them now feels like distance. They begin to accuse you of being distant, cold, self-centered, but what they're really feeling is the absence of the version of you that tolerated the imbalance. There's a kind of grief in growing apart, especially when you love the people you're outgrowing. You want to bring them with you. You want to share the light you've found, but evolution is not always a shared experience. Some are afraid of what growth demands, because to grow means to confront truth, to take responsibility, to release comfort. Not everyone is ready for that confrontation, and so, rather than follow, they find fault in your journey. They resent your reflection because it reveals their refusal to move. It's like the snake shedding its skin, a natural, necessary process. But imagine if those watching the shedding were still clinging to their old hardened layers. Your transformation becomes a mirror to their stagnation, and the more you shine, the more exposed their hiding places become. They don't hate you. They hate the way they feel around you now. They hate that your energy has shifted, that your presence no longer dances to the rhythm they once led. But this isn't about blame. This is about acceptance. Some relationships are meant to last only for a chapter. Their value was real, their presence meaningful, but their time has passed. Holding on beyond that moment doesn't preserve the connection, it poisons it. And as painful as it is to let go, clinging to what's no longer aligned is even more painful. You are not betraying anyone by growing. You are not cruel for choosing the path that calls to your soul. It may feel lonely at times. You may look back and ache for the simplicity of old bonds, but don't confuse comfort with connection, and don't mistake proximity for love. True connection grows with you. True love evolves with you, and what cannot must be released, not in anger but in grace. The hardest truth is also the most liberating one. Not everyone is meant to stay. Some people are bridges, not destinations. Some are teachers, not companions. Let them go with peace. Bless the role they played, but do not hold yourself back trying to make space where your soul no longer fits. Your journey deserves your full presence. Don't dim to stay connected. Rise, even if it means walking alone for a while, because those meant for your highest path will never require you to shrink in order to be loved. So when hatred arrives, ask not why me, but what does my presence stir in others? This question doesn't excuse hatred, but it explains it, and when you understand the roots, you're no longer controlled by the reaction. You become an observer of pain, not a participant in it. Let your light shine, even if it casts shadows. Don't shrink to make others comfortable. The world needs more people who are willing to understand rather than retaliate. And remember, how others feel about you is often a reflection of their own battles. Guard your peace. Let them wrestle with their demons. You've got a journey to walk.